Hi, it's Lisa Tomei Zonnefeld with Prolific Pulse Poetry Podcast. Our next guest will be Andy N. He's the author of 6 full-length poetry books, and the most recent being Haiku of Life. He is also the editor-chief of Spoken Label, a podcast series designed to interview writers, poets, and artists, etc., to Runs in Bed, a book review podcast with his partner, Amanda Steele, Comics Unity, a comic news and related news podcast with Michael and Amanda, and all of these can be found at the usual networks. He also does ambient music under the name of Ocean in the Bottle. Occasionally, he does like to sleep, and he also likes to write on his blog, One Writer, and hispc.blogspot.co.uk. Let's see what Andy has to say. Welcome, everybody. I have Andy in here from the UK, and I'm very excited. He reached out to me about his poetry, and he's got some poetry books out on Amazon, and I would love to hear all about that. And maybe tell us first a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. Okay, yeah, I've been writing a long time now, Lisa, because I'm 52 years old and I've been writing poetry, would you believe, since I was 10, right? I wouldn't want to get that stuff published when I was 10, because frankly, it's horrific. But yeah, I went to university when I got 28, and through going to university, which my degree was in creative writing, it encouraged me to start taking it more serious. And then in the 30s, I joined a writing workshop and got to 38, 39, and I bought my first book out. And since then, I've done 10 full-length poetry books. I know 10. And I've done a novel as well. So it's been pretty full on the past 14 years or so.
Wow. Congratulations. How do you have time for anything else?
I don't know how I do it, to be honest. I really don't, because if people know me, they would know I've been a poet, which I'm a bit less of nowadays. I also co-run a very, very busy spoken word open mic night in Manchester with Speakeasy, which is very, very busy. Because we get an audience and have somewhere between 50 to 100 people every month. And we have 20 to 24 readers. And on top of it, I also run my own podcast as well, called Spoken Label, which is a spoken word, and that's been running weekly now since the beginning of 2016. And I've done over 400 episodes.
Wow. So do you bring different spoken word artists on your podcast to share the work?
Yes, I do. Do lots, because it's very similar to what you do here, Lisa. It'd be like on Zoom, and I've had people in from all over the world. I've not got anybody from Australia yet. I'm planning to, but I've covered a lot of countries. I've covered Canada, America, Mexico, been down to South America, all over Europe, and Russia. And I've got quite a big following in South Africa. Hi, Alta. I know a publisher down there, and she keeps sending a load of friends of hers over to me. And then I've done China, I've done India. Yeah, it's surprising. I think with the advent of Zoom, where you can actually meet writers from sometimes and make friends.
Same. I have people from all over the world that I know now because of Zoom and the pandemic.
Yeah, that's what it was for me, because as soon as I got into the pandemic, I got to use like Zoom like you did. And in a lot of ways, I think it helped me out with writing a lot more, because you go into like Zoom spoken word nights and you learn a lot more about your writing style by hearing writers you wouldn't necessarily hear before. And that's happened to me really a lot, because over lockdown, I learned how to do a lot of writing, a lot of specific forms like haikus, sonnets, tankers, all the stuff I'd never read it before. And that inspired and changed my writing, really.
That's wonderful. So it helps you grow as a writer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've done 2 books of haikus along with 10 books. And I may do a book of sonnets someday, but we'll come on to that. I'm a little bit less fatigued on it, because I fairly recently did a National Poetry Writing Month in April, Napawino, and I managed to do 30 in 30 days, and it wasn't easy doing 30 sonnets in 30 days.
No, that is a challenge. I know for Poetry Month, it was that 30 days of writing, that could be a challenge, and then you pick a certain form. Yeah, that's what we did, and oof, that was a challenge. But probably know my poetry brother Safraz Ahmed. I bet you run into him somewhere because he's from over in Derby, and
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it's not far from me, that because like my brother used to work in Derby, and that's what about an hour and a half on a train from here. It's not particularly that far. Nice city as well.
so you probably cross paths somewhere along the way. So tell
Who
me
knows?
about your poetry book, the one that you had talked to me about.
Yeah, my last poetry book was called Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street. That was the longest book I've had to write, actually. It took me 9 years to write that book, it did. It's just, I'm one of these sort of people where I will often have 4 or 5 folders of things dangling around,
Mhm.
and perhaps not the most organized way, but I get bored very quick, so I move from folder to folder. But this book itself it's basically a novel told over poems through imaginary letters through an unnamed narrator who, at the book starts, was in an unhappy marriage, and he becomes friends with somebody he knew as a child originally called Sarah, and they end up going into having an affair. Then leave the parts and get married, and then unfortunately things go wrong after that. And that's what the book is. It's a lot of imaginary letters told back after that relationship had collapsed. And a lot of it's told in various parts of England all over the place. Henceforth, the title of it, Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street, because that's a big train station in the UK. And the title poem, it covers a lot of the places, the adventures they had. And I wanted to use the cities to
Mhm.
reflect how they reacted to each other. So the cities become like a third character in the book.
Wow. Now that's on Amazon, right?
It is indeed, yes.
I'll have to definitely get that. That sounds like my kind of book to read. Definitely something that has that flow to it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah,
Good.
it's gone down really well, Dylan. I know a number of people have bought it, and everyone's come back to me and said it's a heartfelt, mature, depressing poetry book.
Wow. So when you're not writing poetry, what do you do with your life?
For the moment, I'm looking for another day job at the moment, but we'll avoid that for another day. It's probably been out all day today, but yeah, normally if I'm in the day job, I'm interested in it because my wife, Amanda Nicholson, she's a writer herself. She's done like 6 novels now. She's on the 7th novel, and she's done a few poetry books. So we're always bouncing ideas off each other all the time. So when you're living like with a fellow writer, we're often like talking about writing all the time, and we don't want to watch a lot of television, don't you? So we're big radio listeners. Absolutely love
Mhm.
listen to BBC Radio, a lot of the radio stations over here, music basically as well. And then like both like reading, and that's one.
That sounds really
As a
nice
book.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
have a
I
TV. To
know.
be honest with you, we don't have a television, Lisa, don't you?
Yeah.
Amanda's not had one for about 15 years, and about 10 years of me, don't you? Since I got rid of mine.
Mhm.
I think you
Yeah.
take your danger and if you remove the obstacle like a television. We will watch a program together over tea, say on Amazon or Netflix. But then the
Mhm.
rest of the evening is like our writing time. And we've Amanda's finished her work off as well. So it's like we use that time.
Mhm.
It's a great example of what you can do if you remove an obstacle like television.
Exactly. It can be a big distraction. It really can
Yeah.
be.
I know people that do it and they come home from work. They'll just turn the television on, have the tea, and they've done all night.
Mhm.
And I'm not that obsessed with it.
No, no, there's other things to do. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
That's what I
Yeah.
look at like is I'm a podcasting, I'm doing music. I do a lot
Mhm.
of admin for spoken word night, and I'm writing all the time and doing bits and pieces. I don't know. I tend to be. I think last job I worked at, people thought I was a bit strange actually because they to them, "Oh, I don't have a television," and I'm thinking, "Well, I don't want one."
Yeah. Yeah. Then, when you go to work at, a public place, and people are like, well, how'd you like that show last night? And they talk about the things that were on. It's like, I don't know. There, very little that I follow, because I'm very selective about how I spend my time like that.
Yeah,
So,
well, I'm a bit of an I do like following football, to be honest, but I'm not perfect. I'm not a pure artist.
yeah. Well,
But yeah,
yeah, in our household, my husband's the big football watcher, and while he watches football, I read. And you know, but he's a big reader, and so it's not unusual for us to both be just sitting and reading together, you know. Yeah, so it works out really nicely. Sounds like with you and your wife. So,
I think it's interesting really, when you've got part as a married couple. If there's no ego involved, and there is no ego between the pair of us at all, and we get on great, really do get on great. It's fascinating because I'm going to take your conversation a different way now, Lisa, but you get used to this with me. But one of Amanda's best friends, who I'm not going to name, is a mystic, and she's a fortune teller. And she said as soon as we got together, she said this: we've actually been in a relationship together in a past life.
interesting.
Yeah, I don't think she could work out whether we'd actually been writers in the past life, but we said we've got that sort of bond. I've never seen. I don't tend to see in relationships very often with people. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like we clicked immediately and we got together as a couple, and we've been together 8.5 years now. So she's been married nearly 3. So it's like it's interesting. Like we're always bouncing ideas off each other. Amanda's a horror novelist, really. She started off and she's writing a psychological thriller at the moment. But she does write a lot. She does like writing flash fiction, prose, and poetry as well, like me. So we definitely influenced each other and changed each other's work because I think what I'm very good at, and it's applies to Amanda as well, is we're both constantly evolving as creative people. We never sit still. I think, what do you think about that, Lisa? Do you think as a writer, should we stick to the one form, or should we be constantly moving on?
Well, I tend to jump around myself. So it just works better for me if I'm working on something and, you know, get to a point on it and something else jumps in. I just started on it and I have all these little bits and pieces. Eventually you get it done, you know, what you're working on. And most of the
Yeah,
time I see my way through to all the way to the end, but it's not unusual to have thought interruptions of, gee, I want to write about this, you know, or you know, slightest little thing will grab my attention and I have to write something down about it at least so I can come back to it. So,
yeah. So I think the way I thought it works sometimes it is because when I ever do poetry, I never write a poem in one draft nowadays. Very,
mhm.
very, very rare. It will
Yeah.
be sometimes over a couple of weeks usually, and I can have a full folder. I usually have a full folder poetry knocking round that are
Yeah.
either on the first draft or they're incomplete or even under another name. But we'll come on to that another day because I write under an alias as well.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it tends to be like always got a big folder on the computer ongoing, and that's why it takes me. I can end up with a couple of books going in quick succession, but the books that have been dangling around one way or another for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years sometimes. The novel was a good one that took 15 years to write. Would you believe? That was a horrible process. I just couldn't get it right, don't you? It was one of those ones where did one draft, a couple of days start the second, and the time I got it done, I think I'd done about 6, 7 drafts on it. It was a really difficult process. It was that. It certainly was very different from writing poetry.
Mhm. Do you get any pressure from your publisher to get something out or does it flow pretty good for you?
It was pretty good for me, to be honest. I said I'd done 10 full-length poetry books in 14 years. And I thought after the 10th one, I actually thought that was going to be it. I didn't think there'd be 11 poetry books. I thought I'd got to the end of it with that last book, the Changing Carriages book. But by accident, I've started the 11th book and I've got about 14 poems wrote in it now in about 4 months on the
Wow.
theme of ghosts. But it's not ghost stories. It's ghosts like that haunt me, ghosts that haunt the landscape, how it impacts our lives,
Mhm.
and then ghosts of people in general and stuff like that. So what haunts them, so it's quite a deep book that's coming together, that one. Not much of a comedy, but
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, just the other day I was given a prompt about writing something that was scary, and I just wrote a little bit of something. It wasn't very much of anything, and posted it with friends' little site. She throws it out there, and you throw out what you think. And she's like, "Wow, that's really scary. You should publish that." I'm like, "It's just a little, kind of like a little snippet that I wrote." But wow, I was like, "Okay, maybe I need to do something more with that." So yeah.
Yeah. I
Then
got
I had
asked.
to-
I got asked the other day, and it's not this ain't gonna happen. Unfortunately, get published elsewhere. This, but I ended up got asked to write, and I hope you don't mind mentioning this, a lesbian horror story. So I ended up doing a lesbian werewolf story, and
Interesting.
I got told by the person that's arranging the call out, they wanted it really, really gory, and mine ended up being a love story, which is typical, really. They loved it. They said to me, "Oh, it's Andrew. It was too soppy the ending. If they'd ate each other, fair enough. But it didn't go that way." So I'm going to get
Oh,
published
goodness.
elsewhere now. So an
Wow,
accident again. Story of my
that
life.
sounds interesting. Well, Andy, would you like to share some of your poetry with us?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll get the title poem ready for you straight away now. And the title poem, of course, is Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street. And like I said before, this is the title poem of the book. And what I wanted to do with this poem was, it's the first poem in the book itself. And what I wanted to do was put it on first. It kind of sets a scene for what's going to happen with the poem itself.
Okay.
So, Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street. During those early days, of course, we had to keep it quiet. Whether I was stopping at the Mel Mason in Leeds, and you lied about a new client in Holmesfirth, which went on nearly all night. And how about that chime at Birmingham New Street when the train broke down halfway back from Euston, and we ended up sitting in separate carriages when your husband came to collect you? Do you remember Warwick Castle, Sarah? And Man United before that Champions League match where we could only chat for 5 minutes at the beer counter during half time to prevent anybody becoming suspicious? And the return leg 2 weeks later in Madrid, which I had to cancel last minute when one of my girls went down ill just before I was due to leave, and I ended up spending the night in hospital. Caught in our guilt in ways we didn't realise from an almost nervous beginning when we were reconnecting as friends, clicking open our hearts like suitcases, knock after lock after lock. Sitting on steps outside Manchester Piccadilly train station every time we met, sweeping everything aside under an imaginary table, open-mouthed sorries each time we kissed to start with.
Nice.
That's the positive poem. Would you want a bit more, want a bit more darker?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I'm just going to flick to the back of the book now. I'm going to do one called, this is one called Your Father's Records. And what happened in Your Father's Records is, to understand this one, this is what causes a split between the characters partly, is what happens with the father, that Sarah's father. So I'll read this one out to you, and then I'll put another one I think you'll like as well. Your Father's Records. It wasn't much to show, was it, Sarah, for a lifetime's shopping? Just a few classic albums from your dad. The rest been sold off for beers when your mother stopped his beer tap, which your older sister dropped off in a box without stopping. I felt sorry for him. Do you remember me telling you, Sarah? Covered in fingerprints, clearly dragged off to the local record shop and placed back on the shelf there when nobody clearly would touch them or deal with his abusive behaviour. Making me recall the way he must have felt when they bought them originally before he started cheating on your mum and started spending more and more money in the pub and ignoring all of you as you grew up, needed him. Purchase emotions when he put them back in a huff afterwards, almost like Al Green's "Call me, come back home," or Simple Minds' "Don't you forget about me," clearly skipping for his thoughts when he then died in his mistress's arms, saying almost, My memories are now yours.
Yes. You know,
Okay,
your poems kind of tell a story. They have that flow to them.
that's what I'm trying to do with this book, because some of my books don't necessarily go this way. And certainly the next book is much more narrative poems, but they're individual stories. And this is like, I think I like the look of this, like chapters told in a narrative way that don't really go in any sort of A to B form. Each poem is telling its own story, but
Right.
they're not told in A to B. And the memories, which is the point behind it, are jumping backwards and forwards all the time. It's like a jigsaw puzzle trying to get you to work it all out for yourself, what exactly happened.
Yeah, that's quite a challenge.
That's why it took 9 years, this book, basically. And it was one of those ones where I don't know what you're like with your books, Lisa, if I read the last one out to you, but usually when I do a book, I can end up writing 100 poems for it. That's why it could take me years. Well, the second book, The End of Summer, it was 200. And I ended up picking 45 from it, because it was one of those ones, it took years to pull out all the poems in the order I wanted them in. Because this book, for example, where when I had everything done, there's a lot of outtakes on this. I could make a second book someday. But I remember putting them all down in like a linear order on the floor, printed off, and I was trying to think of myself, well, I know Changing Carriages goes first, and the next poem I'm going to do always was going to be the last poem. But trying to get the order in between the rest of it, it was really, really, really difficult.
Yeah, that's very challenging.
But I'm always, like I said before, I'm always a writer as a poet. You've got to push, you've got to challenge yourself all the time. And I think each book I do, I make it more and more hard for myself each day. But oh well. What doesn't make me breaks myself. Anyway, okay, I'll give you the last poem in the book, and this kind of sums everything up. I think really, it do give a lot of spoilers away from what happens, but I think it's a good way of concluding it.
Okay.
3 visits to Paris within 10 years. The first time, do you remember, Sarah? It rained all the weekend, all the way from the airport in Paris, right up the Saint Laurent on our honeymoon. And we spent most of the afternoon, well, into the evening, in the Latin Quarter, listening to a jazz band which you couldn't stand. 5 years later, and 3 after contracting diabetes. Do you remember, Sarah, having to almost mesmerise me in guilt to get me on the plane, exhausted after the collapse of another adaptation of my book, and nearly losing Michelle during the birth of her first child 3 weeks later? 5 years after, 2 after you died, the guilt follows me off the airport on a cheap stopover to Milan, on the edge of the Seine. A blanket interior to days gone past, as much as words that could still be said. 5 years after, 2 after you had gone, of untold stories stood there, and peripheral sadness, with the rain lost in the brilliance of memory, an effigy in emotion, disappeared into the past, echoing the silence of your goodbye to my mouth.
So, do you issue a box of tissues with your book?
It's recommended.
Yeah. I have a friend who probably would just eat that book up. She would really get into it. I might have to get a copy and send it to her, because she's definitely would like that.
It's ironic. It's ironic to me, Lisa. You guessed today there. I am a very, very serious poet, but as a person, I'm not. I'm very light-hearted, and a lot of the flash fiction I write is a reaction to my poetry, and that tends to be not as always as radio and podcast friendly, shall we say?
Yeah. Andy, is there anything that you would like to share that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah. There's one quick thing I want to bring up today as well. Is I'm at the moment, one thing I've learned a lot is over the last couple of years is I'm mentoring young poets at the moment, actually. And I'm mentoring two young ladies, and I'm going to name them as well because they would appreciate it. Emily and Charlotte. One's from Oxford, one's from York. And what I've been helping a lot of people with recently is, this has come from my experience as a poet really, is encouraging people to write, try and find the voice within them. Because I do believe that we all can write. We've got that, that voice, something inside us that's calling out.
Yes.
And I've been working with both these young ladies, and they're both exceptional talents in their own way. It's made me realise that we've all got it, I think.
Yeah.
It took me to 40 to find it, till I was 38, 39 really. But they're both kids. Emily's 21 and Charlotte, I think, was 24, if memory's correct. But they've both got it already, and I found I learned a lot from working with them. I think the background I had at the time probably held me back. I'm dyspraxic. But if that had been found when I was younger, I don't doubt I'd probably done 20 books by now. When did you first start writing, Lisa, yourself as a writer?
When I was in elementary school, grade school, it was in sixth grade that I really developed a love for poetry, and actually was published with my class, and we did an anthology of Asian forms of poetry, and it's called the Sixth Grade Anthology of Poetry. That's just something that the creative writing instructor did every year, I guess, with her students, because I spoke to someone that was in Kentucky who also had her for a teacher, and she was telling me she remembers hers, and how she also did some things when they were in middle school, junior high. But she was very influential with me understanding about Asian forms of poetry, and I still love to write Asian forms. And now I've taken the Asian forms of poetry and then created, kind of Americanized them, and have been doing some experimental things with that. But yeah, once you get that bug, you don't get rid of it.
No, you
But I
don't.
believe that poetry has a place in all forms of life. I think it helps us in our math skills and and just all of these different skills. My husband, he likes to read poetry. He's not a writer of poetry yet. He at some point he may surprise me, but he's an accountant, and so he's my business partner, so to speak.
Wow. Oh, brilliant. No, I get it completely if you do. I think as well, one thing I've learned from mentoring both Emily and Charlotte is the same as a writer. I think as a 40, I'm always constantly evolving. And when I started doing my books, in 2010, I would have never dreamed I'd done what I've done 14 years later. And I certainly never dreamed I've done a podcast. I would have fronted several bands. I'm doing my own band at the moment, and I've got another band on the way at the moment as well, but albums shortly. And constant work demand and lots of other writers. It's changed my life, don't you? It really has. It's like, I think what happened a lot with me is, I'm not really mentioned this to you, Lisa, actually, was what made me more focused with writing was when I had a major health condition in 2011, because I became diabetic. And it made me much more focused on work, I think. And what happened then was, I certainly don't, with being diabetic, I don't have the energy I used to have prior to that. But what energy I've got, I tend to plan things out a lot more nowadays. I'm very busy, but I manage my health a lot more, and I look after myself working full time, and then been so creative on top of it. And it's been an interesting 12 or 13 years been diabetic, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think when you find something like that happens, a health condition or whatever, it helps you take life more seriously and take yourself more seriously and pay attention to a lot more. Not saying that you didn't take it serious before, but there's another level that kicks in when you find out you have something that you're going to, once you have the diagnosis, you always have the diagnosis. So it's good to have the focus on something else. Otherwise you can get overcome with that. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. It's made life interesting. Like I said, I'm 52 now, and I've got, certainly I'll be writing the rest of my life now. I know for a fact I will be. I don't know what I'm going to be writing yet or what direction it'll go. But yeah, certainly, like I said, I've got another poetry book on the go, and I've got another novel on the way as well. So it's that's been interesting, moving from one thing to another, like changing forms like massively like that. It's I think becoming very good at poetry sometimes. It makes life easier picking up other creative forms. I think sometimes you learn how to, you've mastered one thing. I think it makes it easy to do a second sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, like say some people are very, very good at one musical instrument. They can then pick a second one up much quicker. I think the same applies to writing as well, actually.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think the genre that you choose has kind of forces you to look at other possibilities. Like you may have written mainly poetry for years, but it might make you a better prose writer.
Yeah,
And
definite.
I find that I like to also dabble in some other types of writing, and it helps me. It helps me. To
Yeah,
get down the words.
I think lockdown did that to me. I don't know about you, Lisa, with that, because prior to lockdown, certainly I was really just a poet. And over lockdown, I ended up running an online writers group, actually. Went on for about 4 years, 3 years, actually. And we managed a few other people, and we all encouraged you to try out different forms. And that's when I really got into doing poetic prose and flash fiction, and all kinds of other little bits and pieces. And
Right.
it encouraged me to think to myself, I'm a really good poet. Why not try something else? See if I can master something else. And it's been that way ever since, really. 'Cause I still write poetry, but I'm like Ted, I'm always experimenting. We use that way, then, right? The restlessness of me, definitely, because I have a way I write something is unorthodox sometimes. Because when I was working full time, I used to have train journeys to and from work or long bus rides, and I'd frequently either have a little notebook in my pocket every morning or my tablets, and I'd be writing something going to and from work, and or a book in the bag, just something to get my brain going in the morning sometimes. And that I think is a big help with your creativity and getting anything like that. And that's why another thing I've learned really with it, you're reacting to what you're hearing and stuff like that. And I think I can write really well at home, but when you're out, it's a different feel altogether sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Andy, it's been great having you on here today.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate you, and I will hopefully be talking to you again at some point. You never know.
Love to. Yeah. Always, people are guests. I like talking. Been a pleasure chatting. Pleasure chatting to you today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.